Whew, okay, Darius. Hey, Linda. He's at El Truth for sure. And Linear Bob out there in Silicon Valley. Hey, Daryl, I hear you. I hear you from Columbus, Ohio. Carol from out there in sunny LA. Or is the sun shining out there? We got a lot to talk about. Of course, there's breaking news overnight. It seems that paid leave can be out because of President Biden's negotiations with Cinema and Manchin. I want to know what you feel about that. And then I have a couple of stories uh, that we really need to, I think we really need to talk about. Uh, and I hope you'll be listening, Pastor. It turns out that Claudette Colvin is a name that we all should know. You should know her name like you know Rosa Parks' name, but you don't. She was arrested 9 months before Mrs. Parks. She was a 15-year-old high school student, and she felt the weight of history, and she had gotten on the bus legally. And you were able to be seated from the front, but as white people got to the bus, you would have to move back a seat. And she refused to do that. And for a variety of reasons, they said, she's right, but we're not going to use her case. She was young, she was a dark-skinned black girl, and they felt that. And the feeling of the time was that Rosa Parks would be a more acceptable figure. But there's a lot of history to that. Rosa Parks was also the state secretary of the NAACP. And just so that you know, I had the privilege of knowing Mrs. Parks. She did not engage in colorism. As a matter of fact, when she saw herself, she saw the abuse of her family throughout slavery. So just so that you know that. But this woman's record was never expunged. Just so that you know, Pastor. She has a record 60 plus years later. Mm. Gotcha. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on Thursday, October 28th, 2021. Can you believe we are a month away from Thanksgiving, a month away after that from Christmas? Where did 2021 go? When we are in the midst of the 2022 election season, next week we will see two pivotal races. We'll see if the Democrats can pull it out or if the Republicans will pull it out. We don't know. But today we're going to be talking about Claudette Colvin. She's someone you should know, just as you know Rosa Parks' name. She actually was arrested 9 months before Mrs. Parks, doing the same thing as a 15-year-old high school student. And she's got quite a story to tell. And she was put on probation. She's still on probation for that charge. Can you believe it? Yeah. So she has gone to court at the age of 82, asking to have her record expunged using the same lawyer, Fred Gray, who was really the movement lawyer. In fact, they just named a street after him down in Montgomery. It's amazing. It's an amazing turn of events, and we're going to talk about her story today and why she still has a record and how that shaped her life. It shaped her life. She had to leave Alabama, and she became a domestic up in New York. It's a fascinating story. Ahmaud Arbery, that trial. Of course, they are impaneling a jury. We're going to be talking with Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Attorney Robert Patillo about that. And then, what is going on with the negotiations between the president and Senator Sinema and Manchin. It seems that paid family leave is going to be out. What do you think about that? And then, of course, we're going to be talking about this housing crunch that is disproportionately impacting poor people, obviously, and Black and brown people, and people who live in COVID-afflicted areas. We're going to be talking about that with Dr. Max Wolf and what's happening with COVID-19, latest, of course, with Dr. Deborah Holden, how to treat the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. Got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show, so let's get to some of these headlines before we get good news with Pastor Darius Brooks. In Chicago, we'll have a high of 56 degrees. It will be rainy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, they'll have rain too, 49 degrees. And up there at AM 950 Radio, my brothers and sisters up there sending you all much, 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 much love. Hey, Matt and everybody up there. The Dow closed down 269 points yesterday. The NASDAQ held steady. And the S&P 500 closed down 23 points. A whole lot happened in sports. Wow. Told you the Astros would be coming back. Yes, they did. Now the series is tied. The Astros 7, the Braves 2. They were not going to go into Atlanta down 2 games. Oh, no. They didn't get to the World Series 3 times out of the past 5 years without having that kind of grit. The Astros 7, the Braves 2, everybody. The Packers versus the Cardinals tonight, and the Bulls will be playing the Knicks tonight, and the Timberwolves 113, the Bucks 108. World champions. Well, okay, all right, Timberwolves. The NHL, the Wild will be playing tonight, and the Blackhawks fell to the Maple Leafs yesterday. The Maple Leafs 3, the Blackhawks 2. President Biden heads to Europe today for the second foreign trip of his presidency. First up is Rome for the G20 summit, where he and other leaders will discuss issues facing the international economy, including supply chain snafus and energy prices. He will also stop at the Vatican to meet with Pope Francis. I'm sure that will be a high honor because he's a devout Catholic. Then it's to Glasgow for the UN Climate Summit. He'll give a major speech there, and the pressure will be on him to deliver on his proposed climate agenda, which, of course, is unsettled here. Indeed, in Congress, the Democrats struck a paid family leave from that deal from their huge spending bill, and progressives are furious. This is after the negotiations that President Biden had with Senator Sinema and Manchin. Indeed, it is Senator Manchin who absolutely said pull paid family leave out. Now, it was going to be 12 weeks, and it went down to 4 weeks. They wanted out. Wow. What do you think about that, everybody? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. What do you think about that? What do you think about the negotiations between these two conservatives, these corporatist senators? How is that supposed to work, everybody? And how is that going to play out in 2022? Many people are saying that this is outrageous and shameful, that because of Joe Manchin's opposition, we're going to lose paid family leave. We've already lost 2 free years of community college, and on it has gone, everybody. So I want to hear what your thoughts are today. So let's get to Pastor Darius Brooks, Grace Central Church out there in Westchester, Illinois. You're going to give us some good news today. I know you will. So give it to us, Pastor Brooks.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hello, everybody. Let's journey through the good news. That's what I call it. Santita. Mark 13 and 31 says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away. No one knows about that day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. He says right here in 33 Santita of Mark 13, be on your guard and stay alert. For you too do not know how I'm doing things or how I appoint things out. Santita, if I had to use a thought this morning, it's I'm never off guard when I know God is always on guard. I'm never off guard when I know God is always on guard. As a believer, as a personal believer, and a person who studies for themselves for the direction and the steps of God being in our lives, he knows how to bring things together. But the first thing we have to understand is, as an individual, God, what are you telling me for my steps when I get up this morning at 6 o'clock? I got to do Santita. I got to do Reverend Jackson later today. How do you order my steps so I can make sure your whole purpose is within our purpose? People who are honestly committed to God, His Word, for their own personal lives first, often feel or see things not being accomplished, watch this, Santita, by doing the work. But without a shadow of doubt, when we're committed and faithful to God, for real, you'll be surprised of the reward or the reward that's awarded for doing the work. There's a difference by doing the work and for doing the work. God rewards His word, and He rewards faithfulness always. Often God's way seems foolish, though. but he leads us to a path of transparency. The daily routine can block out God's word in our lives. It prevents us from using what we know his word says. His word that gives us clarity and the power we need to deal with everyday life, for real, that the daily routines just won't give us. Learning to praise God after the answer is obedience. Learning to praise God before the answer is faith. Girl, I got to run about here.
Absolutely.
I'm never off guard when I know God is on guard. Typically, we see things not as they are, but as we are. Typically, we see things not as they are, but as we are. Santita, we're looking everywhere outside of his word for answers, but they're right in front of us. I got to close. Committed people stay away from stale thinking. They keep transformed renewing of God's word rightly divided in their minds to keep you on guard, because God is always on guard. Here he divides the lies from the truth. And I got to close with this. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. God doesn't fix my situation. He uses my situation to fix me.
Ooh, amen to that. I love it. Ooh. The master of the turn of the phrase, the anointed, the appointed. Pastor Darius Brooks, of course, Grace Central Church there in Westchester. They are meeting live every Sunday. What time do you begin your service, Pastor?
10:30 till noon, and I'm excited. And we're out at noon, 10:30 till noon. And on Tuesdays, we do a 1-hour life application class. It's life transforming for real.
Amen to that. Amen to that, everybody. Get on out there. I love it, and you're not going to bump into a more loving congregation than the family, my family, Grace Central. I'm sending you much love today. We've got, of course, Dr. Deborah. I love you, Darius Brooks, Pastor Darius Brooks. We've got Dr. Deborah Furholden on with us today. We're moving real fast through the show, Dr. Furholden, but I wanted to give you the floor to talk about something that you sent me last night, because, there is a big debate about how to treat, say, the unvaccinated, right? Even as I got a report from Michigan Public Radio that ERs are swamped with seriously ill patients. We're going to have to talk about this, but they don't have COVID. A lot of people, because of COVID, have held off on getting their exams, and then little things became big things, and a lot of people are very, very sick. But you've been concerned about a debate about whether the unvaccinated should get priority for monoclonal antibodies.
Yeah, the NIH is now making a recommendation. So it's interesting because it's not specifically for the unvaccinated. So here's what the recommendation is, but it has a really important implication that I thought we should talk about. The recommendation is that people who are at risk for severe illness or hospitalization or death, they're saying because we've run into, in the past, issues around scarcity when it comes to some of these resources. So if there is a scarcity of monoclonal antibodies in a particular hospital or care setting, they're saying you should prioritize patients to receive monoclonal antibodies who are at risk for bad outcomes, right, or severe illness. And that would include people who are unvaccinated. It would include people who are already immunocompromised or have some, kind of pre-existing health condition. So if that is, in fact, is the case, then what it becomes, if you then contract COVID and you've been vaccinated, you would be lower on the priority list for receiving monoclonal antibodies. And what a lot of people don't realize about this treatment, it is very effective. And a lot of people will tell you that it causes a pretty rapid shift in how they're feeling, right? People who get COVID, a lot of times it wipes out, the breathing I've heard from a lot of people is really scary. It's scary to sort of be laying in bed at night and not being able to get your breath fully. And most people who I talk to who've gotten monoclonal antibodies say within a day or two, they start to feel substantially better, right? And that is not the normal course of COVID. It would be many days, and for some people it's more than a week where they're feeling worse and worse every day. But you get the monoclonal antibodies, and then for a lot of people, you start to feel better within a day or so.
Which is why I've been asking about therapeutics. because we've been hearing that about monoclonal antibodies and quite frankly about ivermectin, not the animal grade everybody, which has been one of the big fictions. This is a medicine that won the Nobel Prize. That had not happened in 60 years. So I mean, there have been different therapeutics out here, but they're in short supply. How do we have an oversupply, or should I say a supply of vaccines that a lot of people have not used? We have people in the global south who want the vaccines, but they can't get them. But well, somehow or another, we don't have enough therapeutics. Why are we not producing enough? Are they harder to produce? What's going on?
Well, we've got the capacity that we've got, and the emphasis has been on getting the vaccines, available because, in an ideal world, our goal is to prevent people from, needing so much treatment in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the monoclonal antibodies, interesting enough, you're supposed to get those very early in your course. You're not supposed to, it's not indicated for people once they're severely ill, right? Because, potentially you run the risk of maybe over amping up somebody's already amped up immune system at that point. It could actually have an unintended negative consequence, giving it to people too late, especially when they are now severely ill. So you really are giving it to people to prevent them from becoming seriously ill. And, we know that people who are unvaccinated tend to have more severe illness than people who are vaccinated, as do people who are older, immunocompromised, or have other pre-existing health conditions or chronic conditions. So you're literally giving it, you're making a decision based on, what we know about the likelihood that somebody will struggle with the illness. And when I read that, I just thought they have to be a lot more thoughtful than that. There are a whole lot of healthcare providers who have animosity about treating unvaccinated patients.
Absolutely. But is that fair?
Well, it's an interesting thing because, so one of the things to consider is a lot of people who are unvaccinated because they have so many doubts about the vaccine. But at the same time, when they become ill and they go to the hospital, they want every possible treatment available. And most people are not asking nearly any questions about the treatments because when you're fighting for your life, all you're worried about is surviving. That's, I think, what a lot of healthcare professionals are trying to impress upon people. You're so worried about what's in this vaccine, but you're not worried about what it would be like for you to contract COVID. And most people are not worried about what's in those treatments that they're getting when they go to the hospital and they're fighting for their life.
But Dr.
That's a hard thing to,
No, not to interrupt you, but just to engage you. I think that people are concerned all the way around. Nobody wants COVID. Everything that we've heard about COVID is that it's deadly, if it goes too far, and that nobody wants it. And people come out of it, those who do say, you don't want this. Nobody wants it. Nobody does. But we've not had transparency. We've not had a free and open discussion, even about other vaccines that people give to their children, right? We don't have open discussions. And I think that is very harmful, which is why you're here every day. Because people trust you and you've been very honest about your own personal journey. So that's helped make us feel much more comfortable. You understand what I'm saying? Because people are, nobody wants COVID. Nobody. And my mother said, I told you, there was a woman on because she and my father were on the COVID ward. And she said, I heard this woman screaming, and it was a shrill scream, and it was frightening. And she asked the nurse, what's going on? She said, apparently the woman had fallen into unconsciousness, and when she awakened, she found out that she had COVID. And she was certain she was going to die. And she was scared to death. And she was screaming at the top of her lungs. So, and I just feel like this is a false choice about whether you treat the vaccinated or the unvaccinated, particularly when roughly half and half of us are, vaccinated and unvaccinated. Well, beyond the fact that, as you're in the medical space. The first thing that a doctor is supposed to do is treat you, period. This what it's supposed to do. It's help me with this.
But the reality of it is we already saw this with with COVID. The problem with epidemics is not just that you get this boom in cases of a disease, but also it overburdens our healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is we have the capacity that we have. We saw this earlier in the pandemic. Hospitals were having to make very tough decisions about who they were going to admit, who was going to go on a ventilator, and all of these other things. So these are the actual conversations that we need to be having, because there is some ethical, sort of implications from it. And I'll tell you, as somebody who got vaccinated, to protect myself and to protect others, and somebody who, honors protocols, if I contracted COVID, I would want monoclonal antibodies, and
Mm-hmm.
I would feel that prioritizing somebody who was unvaccinated over me would feel very unfair to me. It would feel very unfair. These are personal choices that people are making. That's my personal opinion. These are personal choices that people are making, and I would not want to feel like I was being penalized or a lower priority because I made a choice to protect myself, and so now, I'm now lower in priority for these potential life-saving resources. I don't know. A part of me feels like maybe we need to start talking about them all together.
I think so. I think so, because I think it's a false choice.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it's a false choice, because we've set up, or should I not we, there has been set up for us a fight between vaccinated and unvaccinated people, between people who deserve and people who don't deserve. And I don't think that that's fair. And we've shut down the conversation about people who have been harmed, just by vaccines. We've shut down all of these conversations. And then we're not talking to people who say, thank God I got it. I mean, it's just, we're not having an open enough conversation. Now we're at each other's throats, and we're debating whether we're going to save someone's life or not. And that to me, I have to tell you, has me feeling some kind of way. Period.
Well, the reality is we've got the resources that we've got, and we're going to have these tough conversations about how those resources get utilized, especially if things continue the way they're going, and we really do have to engage in the scarcity conversation. That's just where we are.
Well, in these last 2 minutes, help to frame the conversation how you think it should go.
Well, the key here, I think, too, is we need people and we need some experts. There are real experts in these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, again, I've been saying this the whole pandemic. Why do we just keep letting politicians and well-meaning people without the right specialty make these decisions? This is an ethics question, I think, so we need ethics folks and we need bioethicists in the conversation. This is also something around health education, because imagine some of the people now who are unvaccinated, and I don't know how it would impact people's decisions or not to get vaccinated. But if you find out, hey, if you get vaccinated and you do contract COVID, you might have a lower likelihood of getting, some of these therapeutics that are available that we know are really supporting people in their recovery. People might say, well, I'm going to take my chance then.
I think that's coercion. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm like, why do we have to make that choice? I don't know. I mean, I'm just asking you because, help, because that's why I'm saying I think I'd love to have you help to guide that conversation, because because this is where we are, and we've been headed here for a minute. We've been headed here for a minute, and it's, last year we couldn't get tested. You just had to walk around with it, right? And then, your fight has been for us to have equity, equal access to vaccines and therapeutics. And now we're like, okay, well, we're going to treat these people and not these. And I'm like, whoa, hold on, whoa. What are we doing here? I feel like this is becoming the Hunger Games. And that's...
Well, I think it'll be a big problem if you put a lower priority on the vaccinated. I think that will stop people.
I think it's a mistake to do that. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody should get a lower priority. As hard as they are manufacturing these vaccines every day, it seems. They need to manufacture these therapeutics. Just help us. Whew. Oh, Dr. Deb.
I know it's a tricky one, right? It's a real It's a real tricky one.
5.
And here's the reality of it, though. There's no legislation, monitoring, anything around any of this. So the decisions are ultimately going to reside with the healthcare provider.
Well,
They're going to have to say. The person who's providing the care at the time is going to have to say. And there's very few, if any, checks and balances or monitoring in place to say whether or not things are happening fairly or equitably or any of that. So,
with a conversation that's been shaped by big pharma and corporatists who tell you that if you've not gotten these shots, that you are criminal and you don't care about your fellow man. It's very unfair. And I think that we're going to have some really hard questions to answer as we course our way through this pandemic. We love Dr. Deborah for holding everybody. We're going to be talking about Claudette Colvin. Stick around, Dr. Deb. I want you to hear this story. Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Deb, have you heard of Claudette Colvin?
Yep.
I want you. She is the young lady, 15 years of age, who was arrested 9 months before Rosa Parks. But,
Yep.
You know, and they said that they didn't pursue her. They didn't let her case go forward because she was an unwed teenage mother. That was not true. She did become pregnant after that. But, you know, they said for a whole lot of reasons, because she was a dark-skinned young black girl, and Rosa Parks was light-skinned, and because she had a certain perception, they felt that she would make a better case. You know, just given how colorist we are. I hear that, and I've emphasized, because I had the blessing of knowing Mrs. Parks in my life. She was not into colorism at all. She was a real strong race woman, just so that you know. And in fact, when she would look at herself, she could see the abuse, she would say, that her foremothers had to absorb in order for her to be here. You know, because when you saw, you know, it was very clear that she had significantly mixed ancestry. And that having been said, this woman's story is very fascinating, Dr. Deb, because she was put on probation. And you know she's still on probation 66 years later.
For this incident?
Do you understand what I'm saying? That's why I wanted you to stay.
How is that possible?
No, that's why I wanted you to stay. I said, oh, no. She's going to love this. What did you say? Yes, for this incident. So she went to court this week with attorney Fred Gray, who was her lawyer then, and who became like the movement lawyer, brilliant lawyer. In fact, they just named a street after him in Montgomery this week. She went back to court with him. He's 90 now, because they would like to have her record expunged, but it completely reshaped her life, Deborah. She had to leave Alabama. She became a domestic up in New York. But so many of her life options were shaped by the fact that she had a record. Are you there?
Yeah, that's unfortunately a story that's all too common in our community. And we are just disproportionately arrested for things that most people don't even get a slap on the wrist for.
Oh my gosh!
You know, even an arrest record can be a scarlet letter for people. And this was one of the big things we saw with the crack cocaine epidemic. You know, those crack laws, unfortunately, were just used to just so disproportionately incarcerate Black and brown people. You know, and people are still living with the legacy effects of those laws and the sort of records that came along with them. You know,
we have Attorney Hoffler.
You know, President Obama tried to make some of that right, but there's a really great article that my friend wrote that's in the Atlantic. I can't remember the title of it, but his name's Carl Hart, and he talked about, you know, with the repeal of that Anti-Drug Abuse Act, if you don't go back and do some kind of restorative justice, right?
Back in 30.
The people who were disproportionately and wrongly incarcerated, right? What about the people who then now have had to live with all the legacy effects and impact of those arrests and incarceration? And the worst part is a lot of people were arrested, held in jails for, you know, some people over a year. And then sort of adjudicated outside of court, and it was as if nothing happened.
I
But they
thought you
got
would
this
enjoy
arrest
it.
record.
And we have Attorney Patillo, and we're back in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I know how to get you started.
Yeah.
Well, we got CK and Robert here. Stay right there.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, October 28th. It's 33 after the hour. I am coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Let's talk today. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Let's talk about this case. We've got a lot to discuss today. Claudette Colvin, do you know who she is? Well, Claudette Colvin was a 15-year-old girl who was sick and tired of being sick and tired. In fact, she got on a bus. That's right, 9 months before Rosa Parks. All these courageous people down there in Alabama, down in the South. Boy, oh boy. She got on this bus, and the custom of the time and the law was that you would, even if you were black, you paid your fare and you could sit in the front, but every time a white person came on, you would have to move back. And every time another white person would come on, you would have to move farther and farther to the back of the bus. And she refused to do it. This is 9 months before Rosa Parks did this. And she was arrested and she was put on probation. And guess what? She's still on probation and she's 82 years of age. And this has shaped her life. But you know what? Dr. Deb stayed with us, but I wanted to, of course, we have to go to our legal eagle, the immediate past president of the National Bar Association and the chair of Rainbow Push, the magnificent C.K. Hoffler. Paula, I know you want to reach out to her right now. Yep, that's right. Paula said Hoffler is up next. Patillo's up next. I hear you. And we've got Robert Patillo, a Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push, and they both host their own shows on WAOK. CK is on at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. Robert's on from 1 to 4 every Sunday. And, of course, CK is legal Q&A with CK. We just had her yesterday. CK Hoffler, set the table for us, with Claudette Colvin, because as I dug into like the details of her case, like after she was arrested, I could only imagine her fear. The police officers were debating her bra size. And we all know that Black women have been physically vulnerable. I mean, that's why Rosa Parks got famous in Alabama, right? She would investigate the unprosecuted rapes of Black women by white men. That happened routinely. C.K. Hoffler, how is it, what happened with Claudette Colvin, and how is it that she is still on probation 66 years later?
66 years later. Good morning, Santita. Yeah, this is one of those cases that makes you want to go to law school when you hear about it. And the reason why I say that is because since we know our history, we know the history of Black women in this country, we know the history, many of us who live in the South or who have been raised in the South, know the history of how Black women were treated. But what we may not know much about is how Black women were treated when incarcerated or when arrested in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s even. We may not know about the kind of abuses that many Black women sustained while in jail, and we can only imagine what it was like for this young 15-year-old girl. Certainly, she probably had to sustain the most inhumane indignities, and at a minimum. Other things that she had to endure, the record doesn't reflect all of that. But the inhumanity of being arrested for just really being in the virtually the exact same situation as Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks started a movement, and Rosa Parks is known for what she did. But this young girl, as you said, refused 9 months before, and it's almost like a little-known Black history fact. So what happened to her was she, like Rosa Parks, was arrested because she just refused to move back. She just refused. She was tired. How we all get tired. It really just is that simple, Santita. So she was, under the laws at that time, she was prosecuted and she was put on parole for life, it appears. And so what's happened is she now wants her record expunged. She wants justice. And it's, I did try to reach out to there's at least one person, I believe, who was her attorney who's still alive, but I was not able to reach that person. But I believe that she should be entitled to get her record expunged. There's no reason why it should not have been expunged all this time. And this is probably one of the things that she just wants to, before she transitions, wants to have done. Mm-hmm. And I think as a lawyer who led an organization, the largest Black organization of Black lawyers in the world, I feel pretty certain that the NBA is going to help her in any way possible, but it's my understanding she has very able counsel as well. So what happened to her, Santita? She suffered the same injustice that Black women have suffered since time immemorial. And she was arrested. I can't say falsely accused, because under the law at that time, it was permissible for them to arrest her. The indignity that she suffered, certainly, and the statute of limitations has passed, but she would have had, in today's environment, probably a civil rights case, a injury case, even potentially, against the authorities. But in the world of civil practice, there are statute of limitations, which is a time frame within which you have to bring a claim. And if you don't bring a claim within that time frame, it's expired. And 66 years later, she would be precluded from bringing a civil case with a treatment. But her record could be and should be expunged, meaning erased, meaning she should not be on parole. She should not have to still every morning wake up with that hanging over her head.
But she had to leave Alabama, and she became a domestic in New York. One gets the sense that this stain on her record really shaped her life options, CK, before I go to Attorney Patillo. It just,
Absolutely.
It limited what she could do.
Well, and that's her testimony. That's her testimony, that she was precluded all these years from really realizing her dreams, mm-hmm. because everywhere she went, she had a record. And even back then, when everything now is computerized, but back then it may not have been computerized, but if you were a Black woman or a Black man, you had been incarcerated and had a record, somehow your record followed you. And you had to disclose, when you, just like today, on a lot of employment papers, you disclose whether you have been a convicted felon, whether you've been arrested, things of that nature. And so it followed her like an albatross around her neck, and nobody believed. Just think of it, 66 years ago, no one would believe a young Black woman. No one would believe that she was wrongfully accused. No one would believe that she was framed. No one would believe that it was unjust, because at the time in this country, that was such a common occurrence that people just assumed, and it did plague her life. It precluded her from really realizing her dreams, despite her efforts to relocate and start again. And that's the injustice and inhumanity of what happened to her.
Wow.
This is a story of inhumanity. Mm. Yes, it's a story of the legal system gone wrong, but that was the state of the legal system 66 years ago. But it's a story of inhumanity, a story of immoral behavior, a story of why it was necessary for your father and Dr. King and so many others to march, why it's necessary to march today, because of these types of inhumanity. And she represents so many. There's so many Black women and Black men who were in the exact same situation, who no one rescued. No one rescued. And many who faced even worse, they were in jail for life, because of something so minor.
Remember when Nelson Mandela came here as the president of the Republic of South Africa, he was still on America's terrorist watch list. I think we have to be mindful of that. Robert Patillo, your thoughts about this? I mean, she is still on probation at 82. She says she wants to get this right for her grandchildren. Wow.
Well, I think this brings up a bigger issue, which is that America loves the new image that they've created for Martin Luther King, the 2020 image of Martin Luther King, the guy on the statue. That's who America loves. But when Martin Luther King was killed, I think his national approval rating was something like 33 or 34% in a Newsweek poll. The people who fought the civil rights movement very often suffered terrible consequences that still have not been remedied today. And Claudette Colvin is one person on that list. And I think it is our duty. This generation has benefited from everything that they did to go back and right many of these wrongs. You still have black political prisoners who are in custody from the 1960s waiting to die in jail for nothing more than fighting back against our government and fighting and standing up for the rights of African Americans. You have many people who after the movement either had to leave town or leave the city, leave the state, just in order to not be killed by the Ku Klux Klan and other officials. You have people that you've never heard of who were part of those marches, part of organizing campaigns around the country that have never been recognized for their sacrifices, but were integral to much of the progress that we made. So much of what we learned about civil rights in this country is kind of distilled down into what I call the civil rights fairy tale. And we all know it. One day Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King woke up and had breakfast together. They decided they were going to ride the Underground Railroad from Selma to Montgomery. They picked up Rosa Parks along the way. She drove them to Washington, D.C., where he did the I Have a Dream speech. And Barack Obama came out, and racism was over. That's the way people learn civil rights in this country. Beginning, middle, and end. And so many people are left out of that story that I really encourage people to go back through their own family history and their own family lineage, and you'll find an old black and white photo of your grandpa, your great auntie, or somebody like that at the lunch counter somewhere, and understand we have to expand out the way that we understand civil rights history and the way that we support these elders who fought for everything we have today that made things right, such as expunging their records, getting pardoned for them, blanket pardons even posthumously. We saw Donald Trump pardoning Joe Johnson, the boxer. Well, there's no reason Joe Biden can't possibly pardon all those who were black political prisoners who suffered through all the things that the FBI did at the time, the CIA, COINTELPRO, and many of the other programs that took so many black lives in the struggle for civil rights, and stop teaching this fairy tale version of history and start making it right by our ancestors.
This is so. Whew. She's on probation right now as we speak, everybody. Claudette Colvin is on probation. And they told so many falsehoods about her life. They said the reason that they could not, that they did not want to put her forward as a symbol of this injustice, of segregation, is because she was a teenage unwed mother. That was not true. She became pregnant just after that. But she was a 15-year-old high school student, and she said she was sitting on the bus, thinking of her high school crush. And wow, and she is on probation 66 years later. She's 82 years of age, trying to clear her name. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Dr. Deb, are you still there before I go to the callers?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I'm just listening, getting my legal lesson from my two favorite lawyers.
I hear you. Stay right there. Let me go to Mama D from Chicago. Mama D, what's on your mind?
Well, hallelujah, greetings. Two things. First of all, she was a minor. Was she charged as an adult? And if she is still on probation, then her case is still active. It's still, why can't she sue?
Hold on one moment. You went out, Mama D. What did you just say? She was charged as a minor, therefore.
What I said was, first of all, was she tried as a juvenile? But if her case is still active, then she is. If she is still on probation today, then her case is still active. Mm-hmm. And if her case is still active, why can't she sue?
CK?
Well, it's my understanding she was in juvenile court, and she was so at the time. And again, what we have to really look at is the laws and the segregation laws in Alabama and throughout the country at that time permitted this ridiculous outcome for this young girl. It permitted that.
Yeah, I get that. But my question is this. If her case is still active because she is still on probation, why can't she sue? It's active. She's still on probation.
She's still on probation. But
my question.
So
thank you.
Thank you, Mama dear.
And I do understand. I think the term active is throwing me off. She's on probation. If there were a probation violation by her, just think about it that way, then theoretically there's something that could be done about that. But I don't believe that she has a cause of action. I don't believe that she would have a cause of action relative to her probation. I think her remedy is to have her record expunged. She was, as crazy as it seems, charged appropriately, as crazy as it seems.
She broke the
law.
law.
Laws of Alabama at that time.
She broke the law.
At that time.
That's right.
When she was charged, she was processed. Now, what she sustained while she was incarcerated and all that kind of stuff, that's maybe a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, for civil claims, the statute of limitations passed. So the open question is, what can she do with her remedy? And her remedy, as I see it, is expungement. And why it's taken this long for it to happen, I have no idea, because certainly after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, after some more progressive laws, I don't know if she attempted to have her record expunged, or if she just, it could have been that she just continued to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because and to live in shame,
because we do that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she became an unwed teenage mother, so she was beaten up about that in 1955, 56. You kidding me? She left Alabama. I mean, people think Dr. King ended up that he was just in Atlanta. He was run out of Alabama. He had to leave. I mean, Robert makes the point, CK and Robert and Dr. Deb, that that, I mean, look, my brother was sent away to boarding school, okay? We grew up in such a hostile Chicago in the 70s. My mother said, if I don't get my son out of here, they will destroy him. He's carrying my father's name. Every other week, there was a news reporter, Walter Jacobson, God bless him. He was tearing Reverend to shreds on the most popular newscast in Chicago. We could count on him, on his perspective, tearing Reverend up at least twice a month. And then you go into your public school with hostile teachers, and on and on and on and on. Oh no, he had to get out. I was here, but I kind of put my head down, did my work. But it's these people who we accept now. Muhammad Ali was hated. And these people they tried to stop him from eating. His wife, Kalila, who was Belinda at the time, she became Kalila. She used her college fund to help sustain their family. CK and Robert, I just think it's important to tell those stories, right?
It is important to tell those stories. It is important for her story to be heard, to be told. And she does make the point, that she felt that Rosa Parks, even though she had sustained what she sustained, she was 15 at the time. In retrospect, Rosa Parks would have been a more acceptable person to lead the movement, if you will, in that
to be the symbol of it, right?
But to be the symbol of it,
right.
And to be the symbol of it, because they felt that her profile, the way she looked, all of that would resonate more and would enable her to go further with it. Nobody really cared about this young woman, Ms. Colvin. No one cared about her. And so she just became another statistic, and then moved to New York at the age of 20. But she was, to be really clear, she was prosecuted in juvenile court. They found her to be a delinquent and gave her probation as a ward of the state pending good behavior. She was never told, she was never informed when her probation ended. And so she carried this with her. So and again, I was not able to reach her lawyer, and I was not able to reach a lawyer who may have represented her previously, but it does not, I think that it doesn't seem as though it would be a horribly complex issue to have her record expunged. But I'm curious as to why it hasn't happened all these years. And it could have just been that she just kept on moving, kept on going forward, and did the best she could. Because that's what we do, and we have to remember, not be critical of anyone, but remember what was going on at that time. And she moved to a whole new, there's a big difference in the 50s and 60s between New York and Alabama. Mm-hmm. She moved from Alabama to New York and started when she was 20, so at the tender age of 20. And she just continued on with her life, but it has always been over her family's head. They have, the testimony is that they've lived with a great deal of fear of what it might be, fear of what could happen to her because of that experience. And again, the inhumanity, this is a story of inhumanity, incivility, and what she probably had to endure when she was incarcerated during this whole process, being 15 years old. Imagine the fear, the terror that she experienced and her family. And then being labeled like a scarlet letter, that's what we see on for other people. Scarlet letter, is following her like an albatross around her neck. And her probably never being able to speak out and be public for fear that she'll be incarcerated again. That's what it is to be on probation, not knowing that any of your actions could cause you to go back into jail.
Well, and then as a teenage unwed mother, the shame, because there was shame on that at that time, absolute shame. And colorism being what it was, because Rosa Parks was deemed the more acceptable face of the Montgomery bus boycott because she was a very light-skinned Black woman. She was obviously from a background that had a lot of she would tell you she had a lot of white blood, some indigenous blood, and that was not something that made her feel good. But she was also the state secretary of the NAACP when it was illegal to even be a member. And she was well known throughout the state because she would pursue the cases of Black women who'd been raped by Black women, whether it was by white men, whether it was one white guy or whether it was a gang rape, like in the case of Reese Taylor. She would investigate those cases and doggedly pursue justice for these Black women and Black girls. So that's what you should know. Don't ever forget that about Rosa Parks. And she, too, was chased out of Alabama up to Detroit. And it was John Conyers who saved her from poverty and hired her in his office, Congressman John Conyers, the same man who on the day after Dr. King was killed, the most unpopular man in America, he went and said, we need to honor him with a holiday. And every year, without fail, he doggedly pursued that. I will always love John Conyers. May he rest in power and peace. I got about a minute for you, Robert Patillo, because you all going to stay with me for a little bit. We've got a lot to talk about today. Robert Patillo, your closing thoughts about this.
I think this is just more the reason that we have to dig deeper and control our own narrative on the history of civil rights. Now, all of a sudden, if anyone notices, you'll hear Mitch McConnell quoting Martin Luther King. You'll hear conservatives saying, well, this is something Martin Luther King never would have believed in, because they've created their own version of Martin Luther King, and they start pushing that. This is the reason they're so against quote-unquote CRT in schools, because they don't want this version of our history being taught to us, because they're afraid people might be kind of upset if they understand that this wasn't all a Disney movie that was all wrapped up very neatly in a bundle after an hour and 35 minutes. And if we do not start building that, not start creating that, then in 100 years, you'll start seeing things like the story of Martin Luther King starring Brad Pitt, the Rosa Parks story with Taylor Swift, those kinds of things. They'll make where we weren't even in the story at all. So we got to start dominating and controlling our own agenda, otherwise we lose it.
1 minute.
Well, no, amen to that, because they're headed in that direction now. They are heading in that direction. Be very, very clear. No, because that's how it works, and that's why we have to tell our own story. And you need to know who Claudette Colvin is. Look her up. I posted several of the articles about her. We honored her at Rainbow Push, as you recall, CK, several years ago. Just because Reverend Jackson, with his sensitivity and sensibility, said, no, we've got to honor her. You need to know who she is. You need to know her story. You need to know why you have the freedoms that you have today. That a 15-year-old girl refused to move to the back of the bus.
15.
She refused. She refused. And she took the hit.
10.
So when I see people who are unwilling to pay the price for our freedom and liberty, you're not my hero. Let's talk about Ahmaud Arbery. And then you have to sneak something else in on you, CK. Paid family leaves. Ooh, I think that's off the table. More and more.
Yeah.
The great things that we need are off the table. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute.
Take the time to say
CK, I just saw that this morning, just as I saw it last night, then I saw it this morning, and it's percolating. And then I saw Debbie Dingell, the congresswoman from Michigan, and she was furious about it. And I think it's a mess, and we've been talking about it. So if you don't mind, I want you to give us an update on the Arbery case, and if we could pivot to that.
Sure.
Because but I want us, but if you could just help us to understand the slavery era Georgia law that the defense is using, if you just,
Okay.
I mean, whew. But you know, my brother Jesse is so right. Former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. He said slavery is at the center of American life, of our history, and it's at the center of American life. Just everywhere you turn, you can't get past it. Oh, Paula said, Muhammad Ali, that's right. His grandson is a tremendous boxer, and he won a title last weekend. That's right. And he's only 21. God bless him. God bless him.
I'm turning off my notifications, but that was my. I apologize.
It's okay. Is Deborah still there? 'Cause, she loves you and Robert. I think you're her morning giggle.
And I love her. Sometimes we need inspiration.
Whew.
We need inspiration.
Santita, I've got to send you the clips of Dr. Furholden debating Umar Johnson on my show about the vaccines. It was great radio.
Dr. Deb, are you still there? Tell me about it.
Y'all know I'm on mute laughing.
Tell us, come on.
Martin Luther King, the story of Martin Luther King starring Brad Pitt.
You know it's coming. You know it's coming. Now, they never let Al Pacino play John F. Kennedy. But, in a minute, he is going to be Brad Pitt. You just watch. You watch. You watch. You just watch. So, well, tell us about what happened with Dr. Deb and Dr. Johnson. I love it.
Well, whenever I get a call from Attorney Patillo on Sunday, you already know.
Oh, bless your heart. You, honey, you're a good one because you go anyhow. How about that?
I told you, Robin's show is very different from your show. His audience is a very different audience too.
Boy, they're all right with me. I love it. Because, please, I can only imagine what Dick Gregory would be saying right now if he were alive and here. And guess what? We would be listening to him too.
Yeah.
Well, we have experienced so much. Oh, my heavens. And, and we're surviving people, but my goodness, we've experienced so much that's been so horrific. It's been horrific. And, big ups to our ancestors for all that they endured. Good grief. Whew. It's a lot. This is not inconsequential what we have endured. But I still would have loved to have been in on that. I wish I could have seen it. Robert, then you give me a snapshot. I got a minute.
Well, basically, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there about the virus and the vaccine in particular. And so we started getting into some of the conspiracy territory. So during the commercial, I call up Dr. D. I'm like, Deborah, you busy? She's like, no.
No,
you didn't. I'm on the radio real quick. before I know it, Deborah then tagged in her friend, Dr. Mylan. So now I've just got a whole panel of doctors. So for every conspiracy, here they come with facts and statistics and numbers and everything. I'm like, this is the type of radio we need, because I just got, random epidemiologists on speed dial.
Oh, and she never does that with me. She never brings all these other people in. She never does that. Oh.
So here's the best. The best is that Dr. Umar got his degree from a school of osteopathic medicine. Okay, now, so I bring my friend in who is an actual MD, anesthesiologist, treats COVID patients, intubates COVID patients, all of that. So I said, come on the show with Dr. Umar. He's like, who's Dr. Umar? He looked him up. He said, this guy's a clinical psychologist. What's he doing talking about COVID? I said, man, just come on. I thought it was really good, though. I thought it was good because I was surprised. Yeah, because some of the questions he asked, it's the same questions that a lot of people have. It's the same questions. How he took the answers, I don't know. But it's like, we spoke the truth. We spoke truth. So, I would love to be able to have a grapple with him in a even less formal setting, because I did look at some of his stuff.
Ooh. And
he could be a real trip.
Yeah, we're trying to work on an Instagram Live. We just got to get everybody's schedule together.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw his segment when he was on Roland Martin. That was a trip.
Oh,
that was a trip. They got to a name-calling match.
Oh.
1 minute.
Oh, okay. That's nice. No, that's not me. No, Santita is not doing all that. That's a little excited.
Yeah.
I can't, that's a little bit too much excitement. Although I enjoy it. I love watching it. But it's a little bit too much for me. Plus, it's just a different thing all the way around, but I love it. And I love Robert's show. I mean, honey, his intro for me was, hey, I didn't even recognize myself. It was too rich. Oh my gosh.
15. 10. 5.
Can change the world, change the world, change the world. Can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, Hour 2, Thursday, October 28th, 2021. I'm coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And I want you to meet my morning stars on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show. That's right. Meet everybody over there. Robert, Anthony, Jewel. Everybody get on over there. Get on over there. Get on over there. And then, of course, they are also on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. And we're streaming on WCBT 820's Facebook page as well. And I want to hear your voices, everybody. 763-9278 as we talk about Ahmaud Arbery and as we talk about Joe Manchin, who is... he is helping to remove the paid family leave out of the Build Back Better bill. I mean, we're losing more and more pieces. So I want to know what you think about that, too. What do you think about that? And then Dr. Max Wolf will be talking about this housing crunch and the rising numbers of evictions. That's right. We got a lot to talk about here on the Santita Jackson Show. So please, let's get to some of these headlines so we can get back and find out about Ahmaud Arbery and also find out from you what you're thinking about the exclusion of paid family leave from this bill. Chicago will have a high of 56 degrees. It will be rainy, though. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 49 degrees. It will also be rainy. The Dow closed down 269 points yesterday. The NASDAQ held steady. The S&P 500 closed down 23 points. In the World Series, the Astros, well, they came roaring back. They were not going to Atlanta. down 2-0. So the series is tied at 1. The Astros uh, scored 7 runs yesterday, and the Atlanta team scored 2. The Packers will be playing the Cardinals tonight in the NFL football season, and the Bulls will be playing the Knicks. Oh, I love this time of year when all of these sports, we have so many choices. The Timberwolves were triumphant over the Bucks. The Timberwolves won 13, the Bucks 108. And tonight, the Wild will be playing, and the Blackhawks, well, they fell to the Maple Leafs last night. The Maple Leafs 3, the Blackhawks 2. Well, President Biden is heading to Europe today. He will be going to Rome for the G20 summit. He will be sitting with the Pope, and, that's a high honor for him because he is a devout Catholic. And he will go to a UN climate summit in Scotland. He'll give a major speech there, and the pressure will be on him to deliver on his proposed climate agenda, which has not passed yet. So he is going to be making a stop to the Hill before he gets on the plane and goes overseas because he is pushing to get Build Back Better and the hard infrastructure bill through. Will he be able to make a big difference? We don't know. Democrats struck paid family leave from their huge spending bill yesterday to pare down the huge price tag and appeal to moderates. Well, you know what we call them on the Santita Jackson Show, the corporatists. It's a huge blow to progressives and to President Biden's agenda, as since he specifically named paid family leave as an important priority. I'm going to talk about that with you today, everybody, because we need to know, how is this going to work? You don't have community college 2 years paid. Now we don't have paid family leave. I mean, what is this? All because of Joe Manchin? Really? Ooh. Billionaires should donate a mere 36/100th of 1% of their pandemic profits to feed, guess what, everybody? 42 million starving people. Wow. That's all they would have to give. That's all they would have to give. What do you think about that, everybody? Outrageous and shameful. The Democrats are cutting paid leave due to Joe Manchin's opposition. What do you think about that, everybody? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Of course, we've got attorney Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push, brilliant radio talk show host on WAOK every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. And of course, she also hosts on WAOK every Tuesday. CK has her own show at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But of course, she has legal Q&A with CK on the Santita Jackson Show every Wednesday. We love it. We love it. And she is the chair of the board of Rainbow Push and the past immediate president of the National Bar Association. I think we still have Dr. Deborah Verholden tucked around there too, because, but she's on mute because Robert cracks her up. But, we need to find out as we talk about paid family leave. Talk to me about the Ahmaud Arbery case, because it seems, I don't know how they could have a defense. It seems indefensible how this young man was killed, attorney C.K. Hoffler. But what's amazing is that they're going to use a slavery era law to defend themselves. Help us understand what's happening.
Good morning again, Santita, and to our panel and to all our listeners. Yeah, this is something that is hard to believe. But we just talked about Claudette Colvin and the fact that at the time she was arrested and charged. She had violated the law. And believe it or not, there's an 1863 law in Georgia. And by the way, this kind of law exists in many other states, including Florida, because you remember Trayvon Martin was the case involved this law as well. And it was part of the slave-holding Southern Confederate, during slavery, during the Civil War, a bunch of Southern states had this type of law. 1863, this law has been on the books in Georgia, or was on the books in Georgia at the time that Ahmaud Arbery was killed. On February 23rd of 2020, when he was killed, this 1863 law, which allowed it to be legal in Georgia for people to arrest someone and I'm going to quote this, where they had reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion that they were doing something wrong. That's in Georgia in 2020 when Ahmaud Arbery was killed. So their defense in this case was that these three defendants felt that Ahmaud Arbery they felt that they had reasonable and probable grounds to suspect that that he was committing a crime, which was burglary. That they saw him, he looked suspicious, he was acting suspicious, and so they felt that because they suspected that he was involved in burglary, they chased him in two pickup trucks and hunted him down like a dog and killed him. And that is their defense, that they had reason to believe that he had done something wrong, reason to believe that he was in the midst of a burglary. And under Georgia law, that is at the time, a viable defense. So what we have to understand when we're looking at these laws in different states as it relates to how they are applied or used against Black and brown people is archaic laws that date back to 1863 that most people don't even know about, don't even use, are used as a defense to bad behavior, to excessive use of force, to murder. And sometimes they are actually valid, and jurors are persuaded that that is the case. The prosecution is going to argue, of course, that there was no probable cause. There was no reason for them to suspect he was doing anything other than jogging. And he probably stopped. Even the property owner said he probably was just stopping to get a drink of water. There was nothing for him to steal in there, first of all. And secondly, there was nothing improper. I mean, I'm sure that there are a lot of white kids that do that also. But that is what they're using as that's their main defense. And then also they're saying it was self-defense, because they're saying that once they cornered him and chased him down, he was, unruly. And it was self-defense ultimately. So that's how they're going to defend this case. As you know, Santita, I cover this case as a guest on Court TV quite frequently. In fact, after this show at 10 o'clock, I'm covering it in some other litigation, some other trials throughout the country. And they're still picking a jury. This is day 8 of voir dire jury selection. And it appears as though possibly next week, they will have opening statements in Ahmaud Arbery's cases. And Ahmaud Arbery, the cases involving Ahmaud Arbery. So these 3 defendants will be on trial, but it will be very interesting to see how the defense uses this old law. And I think we cannot ever say that cases like this are slam dunk, because part of the case, and when you're trying a case, part of it turns on the facts. The jury, who is the trier of facts in this case, they will listen to the facts. The evidence in this case. Listen to it, they'll watch the video, and all the other evidence is presented by both sides. But then there's the law. And one of the laws that the defense is going to ask the court to consider, and they're going to ask the judge to dismiss the case after all the evidence is in, what we call a directed verdict as a matter of law. And they're going to probably use this statute and say, even with all the evidence that's in, all the facts, as a matter of law, because of this 1863 statute, that they were merely operating within the law in Georgia, and what they did was legal in Georgia. That's what they're going to try to argue. And so part of this is going to be a legal argument. I don't think the judge is going to grant it, but they're going to try, because of course they must try. And then they're going to say that they were also acting in self-defense once they got into the struggle with Ahmaud Arbery, and that he was so unruly, big, disturbed, and all of that, that they had no choice but to just shoot him and kill him.
Unbelievable.
As a matter of self-defense.
We're going to keep up with this case. Of course, CK, you can see her on Court TV. She is covering this case. They're asking for her opinion. Thank goodness for that. But we're also going to be checking her out on MSNBC. She has been on all the platforms. And when you see her there, send an email and say you want to see more of her, because that's what we need to do. CK, we're making a hard pivot, because you know what? Paid family leave is at risk of falling out of this package. Now, look, the Build Back Better plan has gone from $16 million. That was Bernie Sanders' idea. Then it was taken down to $6 million. Okay, then it went to $3.5 trillion. Now, most of us didn't know what was in it. Now it's going to be south of $2 trillion, it appears, unless the progressives hold on and say, no, we're not going to take this. We're not going to take this, because, they can do that. And they can shut all of this down, and I hope that they do, because we have lost 2 years of free community college. Now paid family leave, really? What else are we giving away to Sinema and Manchin, to these senators? Why them? I don't get it. Very quickly, Robert, I'm going to go to some of these callers. Robert, what are your thoughts? And what are your people saying on your show?
Well, at this point, people are saying just scrap the bill altogether. What exactly is the point of it? Because once you're down to now, we're talking about $1.5 trillion, less than half of the half of the half of what we're talking about. So Joe Biden can still do a signing ceremony in the Rose Garden, do a nice speech saying that I got my agenda done, hopefully get a bump in his poll numbers, but have a bill that's effectively impotent from the minute that it's passed. That it's not big enough to actually transform the economy. What we're really talking about is just a drop in a bucket, slush fund, port barrel projects so they can give away to some of their liberal interests. And remember, the $1.2 trillion bill, which is paired with this, it just sailed straight through the Congress. It sailed through the Senate, got 19 Republican votes on a bill that was that's really just giving away free money to all of your contractor friends, giving away free money to all of the construction interests and those sorts of people. So at the end of the day, Republicans are getting exactly what they want on the infrastructure bill, because remember, they had an infrastructure bill under Trump. And then Democrats have negotiated with themselves to the point of having a bill that does nothing that they intended for it to do. So even going into 2022, this bill, imagine being a congressional a person in Congress or a senator in a tight race, and you're running on the Afghanistan withdrawal. You're running on the economy, the way that it's going right now with the severe inflation and supply chain issues. You're running on not being able to pass voting rights. You're running on not being able to pass John Lewis Justice and Policing Bill. And then the feather in your cap is you're running on getting roughly less than half of the 3.5 trillion, which is about half of the 6 trillion, which was less than half of the 16 trillion, which even then was still less than the 20 trillion that the Army Corps of Engineers said we needed to build back our infrastructure. So I think Democrats have effectively shot themselves in the foot again. It's going to be interesting to see what they try to do to salvage this. But right now, normally the party in power loses votes in the midterm. They lose seats in the midterm elections. This could be a MAGA landslide in 2022. That's what they're giving Democrats to run on. And I think they'll be the fault of the Democratic Party for caving and capitulating to Manchin and Sinema.
773 9278 773 763 WCPT. Let me go to you, Chaparral. Chaparral, what's on your mind?
Hey, Santita, let me tell you, I am mad as hell.
No,
so
no, I want you to be honest with us. Tell us, how do you feel, really?
Listen, I'm tweeting all morning, letting them know exactly how I feel about this bill. And I actually tweeted Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren this morning and advised them that they also can do the same exact thing that Sinema was doing, and that is hold the line. They could actually hold the line. We don't need them to go ahead and support this bill because of the same reason that Manchin and Sinema are objecting to it. We need them to hold the line. And this is what they need to absolutely do. Hold the line. And so until Americans realize what we're losing, and I agree with Robert, we should just scrap the whole bill. What's the point? What are we getting out of this bill? Not a damn thing. And we see it and we know it, and let it go. Let it go. Let it ride. Let it ride.
So how do you think that's going to play out in 2022, Chaparral?
Democrats going to stay home. That's it. They're going to stay home. That's it. That's how it's going to happen.
When you got up and you heard that paid family leave was on the chopping block, but because the president has been holed up with Senator Sinema and Manchin for the past few days, negotiating with them about the Build Back Better bill. And see, what's bothering me is that ideologically, the three of them are in sync. Look, I'm not mad. I like Joe Biden personally, but ideologically, they're in sync. So what kind of negotiation are you having with people who are ideologically synced up with you? He's the one who said, I hate the progressives. Remember when he said that, Chaparral? Robert, CK, Deborah? You remember that?
Absolutely.
Remember, he said that. He didn't say, well, Bernie and I are locked. Well, we have some disagreements, but no. He said, I beat him. I beat the socialist. So here we go. Oh my gosh. Robert, what is your response to what you're hearing from Chappelle?
Well, Chappelle's exactly right. I think it's going to be very much what we hear from a big chunk of the Democratic base, where, we had all this high-flying language when the Biden administration was running. The first big lie was, as soon as you vote for Warnock and Ossoff, we'll get $2,000 checks out the door immediately. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't get any checks out the door immediately. They didn't get $2,000 out the door. When it comes to the Afghan withdrawal, now I'll draw down the war in Afghanistan on day one. No, you didn't. And then when you did, it was terrible. There's been a long list of things that Democrats have promised they were going to do and that they haven't even attempted to do. And then the things they have attempted, why would you allow 80 million people who voted to have their votes be stopped by Joe Manchin from one of the smallest states in the country and then Christian Sinema from Arizona? Why exactly is it that the wants, needs, and desires of 80 million Americans are less important than the senator from West Virginia? And where is this legislative master that we elected? I've been in Washington for 50 years. I know all the hallways of the Senate. I know how to bring these people together. It seems his method of bringing people together is just capitulate to Joe Manchin. So maybe we should just elect Joe Manchin for the second term, and then maybe we can get something done in this country. But right now, Joe Biden has egg on his face when it comes to negotiating with the quote-unquote centrist wing of the Democratic Party, which is really the corporate wing. If you thought the senator from West Virginia was ever going to vote for a climate change initiative, you don't understand West Virginia. And then Christian Sinema, I don't think anyone quite understands what she's on or what she's been up to. But so much for that idea of representation matters, because at the end of the day, money still matters more than that. So Joe Biden is going to have to figure out a way to salvage his presidency at this point. Maybe the idea is we'll get Build Back Better reconciliation before Thanksgiving, and then we can come back in 2022 with another reconciliation bill, because you can only use reconciliation twice in a calendar year. Maybe that's the plan to break these things up. But if Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema are still the same senators at the beginning of next year, I don't see what will change between now and trying to do it later. And when you still have voting rights and criminal justice reform to get done, I don't see this agenda ever taking place. And I see a lot of people sitting home in 2022.
CK, do you see people sitting home?
I do and I don't. In Georgia, Raphael Warnock is going to be up for re-election. People are not going to sit home in Georgia and let Raphael Warnock lose. So I do agree that globally Democrats may sit home and we're going to lose ground. But I don't believe that when it comes to Raphael Warnock, just going with the next set or next couple rounds of elections that we're going to see, people in Georgia are going to fight because we've got voter suppression. Sick and tired. I think it's and terrible voter suppression. So I think that people are enraged that there are these terrible laws on the books in Georgia, and there's every reason to fight. And who stands in the balance is Raphael Warnock. So I think that in Georgia, I think it's going to be different, and we'll see now, because we've got our mayoral race that's our mayoral elections coming up shortly, just to see how the new voter suppressive system is working. But I do think that nationwide, there's a lot of apathy, a lot of distrust, a lot of disgust. A lot of people feel the same way that Shakur feels, but there are other people that feel that what are our options? If we sit back, and it'll be worse. So I'm torn, and I think it's going to turn on state by state, and what people feel is what they have at stake. But people are not in Georgia going to let Raphael Warnock just wallow and lose, and they're just not going to. They're not going to stay home, because that is what's at risk here. And many perceive that he's done an excellent job in representing the interests of Georgia.
Sure. I mean, well, it's good to see that. I think it is uneven. Oh. 30 seconds, Chappelle.
Quickly, I would say that's the main point. Democrats act like they don't even want to support the Voting Rights Act that's going to help them stay in office. That's the shame of all of this. They want us to just accept all the garbage that they're throwing us, but they won't even protect the vote that they need to stay in office. That's the craziness of all of what's happening.
Stay right there. Hey, we've got Dr. Max Wolf coming up, talking about all of these evictions that are coming. I mean, all the stuff is coming. You need progressive policies because we need radical solutions because we have radical problems. So saying that you defeated the socialists, whatever Bernie is, I tell you what, he has a program that most of us agree with. People need paid family leave. They need 2 years of free community college. They need. And Sinema and Manchin have been vested with all this power so that they can take. It's not really them. They are standing in for the oligarchs. They're corporatists. They're not moderates. They're not centrists. They're corporatists. And they're taking food off of your table and out of your mouth and out of your baby's mouth. How do you feel about that? And they're evicting you. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show with Dr. Max Wolf in just a few minutes. Ooh.
So I think, with Chappelle, if you're still there, I think what you're saying is true nationwide. But here in Georgia, and Robert, I don't know if you agree, but in what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, Raphael Warnock is fighting here. And he may be one of the few senators fighting the way he's fighting, but he's fighting and people perceive he's fighting, and he's doing a lot for Georgians, and he's holding true to what he committed to do as a U.S. Senator.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm hoping for his sake that he will. Robert, your thoughts? I'm sorry.
All I was going to say is I agree that Raphael Warnock is running a great race, and he's on the ground talking to voters. But, he's running upstream against everything that Biden is deluging down against. They're running against Warnock. They're running against Biden and his agenda. So it's a heavy lift for one candidate to overcome all the typhoon that's coming down against him from the National Party not helping.
Without a question. But what I'm banking on, what I think he's banking on, and what I'm seeing is that people in Georgia, because of how they feel about everything else going on, they know that they have to get out and vote so that Raphael Warnock can get back in office. So that's where I think here in Georgia, the rubber is meeting the road in terms of getting out and voting. I think there's, apathy, disappointment, a lack of trust, disgust, and all that other kind of stuff because people are suffering. Homelessness is high. I mean, a lot of things are happening, and it's not just Georgia. But the overriding sentiment, I believe, is we got to keep Raphael Warnock in because if there's one person, and it's not just one person, but if there's someone that they feel is a strong advocate for the interests of Georgians, at this point, it is Senator Warnock. So I think it is a lot for one person. Like Robert said, it's a lot for one person to tackle. But I just believe in the power of the people on voting. And those folks that voted him in are those folks who are going to continue to vote. So I think that's Georgia. But just globally, throughout the country, I think it probably is, it's very unfortunate.
I hope that's the case,
Dr.
CK.
Wolf was with us.
I mean, I hope that the only reason I'm saying that is because I'm looking at what's happening in Virginia, right? Now, Virginia is, an interesting state. That's your place. You're from there. It's military. That's why I was so shocked when Reverend won it in '84. But you have a lot of different layers. But you've got Doug Wilder, the first Black elected governor in our nation's history, who's coming in on Terry McAuliffe. You had Justin Fairfax, the lieutenant governor, and two Black women who could have been the nominees of the party. They were knocked out to make way for him. I mean, a lot of people are feeling all kinds of ways, but you're right, CK. Politics, it's local. So we're going to see how this plays out. Because Terry McAuliffe didn't really want Biden to come in there for him. He was like, "You too unpopular, dude." What?
Well, let me just say this. I hope that I'm right in Georgia.
You are.
And I'm not the only hope because the thing is he has been a uniting force, I believe, just sitting here in Georgia. So I think people will turn out, but it's not just about Raphael Warnock, but I think that's going to be a mobilizing force for our community and the people who need to turn out to vote for him.
I hope so.
Whether they vote for other stuff, people don't vote, they might just look at one thing But the apathy certainly is there, I think, globally right now, and distress and all the other things too. And
I think now it's anger. It's beyond apathy. Now it's anger. People feel a sense of betrayal. Wait, hold on, Dr. Wolf. Hold on, Dr. Wolf.
Yep.
Dr. Wolf, you there?
How are you? Yes, I am. How are you?
Okay. Oh, good. Well, we've been talking about Joe Manchin and stay right there.
Change the world, change the world. Can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Bottom of the hour on Thursday, October 28th, 2021. You know what that means. We've got Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist. Can't wait to hear his thoughts about this. Wow, we thought that Build Back Better might save people from being evicted. That's not going to happen, everybody. And we're watching evictions that are now beginning to, they're really beginning to go through the roof. And just as I was bringing you on, Dr. Wolf, because, I think Attorney C.K. Hoffler and I think Attorney Robert Patillo is still there. And maybe even Chaparral. I don't know. It's turned into a big old party. But I see that our GDP grew by 2%, and they said that's not a good thing. Talk to me about this inflation as we go into eviction. What is going on here? Because I tell you what, going to the grocery store is no fun. It's costing us a lot of money to eat. Dr. Wolf?
I think we should probably. Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay, I can hear you now.
I hear you.
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay, so there's a lot of things going on in terms of what's causing the price movements that we're seeing, right? So it's probably a long conversation, maybe a show or more to sort that through. One worth doing, but still something sort of complex. But I think what we're seeing is that we had an initial bounce back that was probably pretty good from the downturn, because the downturn was so sudden and so severe and so kind of profound that we had really good numbers. And just like we do with COVID itself, we have constantly prematurely announced we're out of the woods because we want to be, which is understandable. But then we've started to make decisions about major choices as though our wishful thinking was in fact analysis, and that causes trouble, right? And so this idea that we're just going to bounce right back from as profound and massive a dislocation globally as occurred in the first, say, 12 to 18 months of COVID was improbable. And so this effort to restart things really quickly without making any changes allowed us to have this big jump out of the gates and then kind of smack into a wall, right? So we've had this sort of odd situation develop here. We're seeing it in a bunch of places. So we see it in governors in 22 states, mostly or almost completely red states, who decided not to take the unemployment benefits because they thought everyone was going to go back to work if they literally forced them under penalty of ruin, economic ruin. And we learned that it didn't work. They're just ruined economically. They didn't go back to work. You have people trying carrots, not sticks, places like New Jersey and other places that were generous and also didn't get people back to work. We have the moratoria ending in part by an activist legal interpretation, right? So partly by judges as opposed to policymakers, but nonetheless. So we have these moratoriums coming off, and we actually haven't seen a huge increase in evictions yet, although we've seen some uptick in the filing. But more than that, we see a bunch of people who are now in a situation where even if they take the jobs, the wages probably haven't risen enough for them to support themselves in those jobs. And the prices that they face are really spiraling up. So you have this really major increase in the cost of gasoline, which is hitting people pretty hard. If they, put gas in a car and drive around, and that's how most of us get around. Rents are up on the order of 10 to 15% year over year, right? So food is way up. And if you look at transportation, food, and housing, the reason we look at those so much in economics is those tend to be the big costs. That's more than half of what the average household kind of spends to get through the month. So we're starting to see a situation where wages have ticked up a little bit, but a lot of people aren't working. Benefits are going down. We're waiting to see what, if any, of the Build Back Better kind of comes through. And it looks like about half of it is going to make it through, 60% of the initial. So we're going to build back 40% less better than we initially thought we were. And so I think the reality is sinking in that there were problems before COVID. COVID isn't over, right? And the damage from COVID isn't even fully visible yet, let alone repaired. Right? And that damage can be to people's bodies and their health. And think about long COVID and COVID orphans and all these things we don't hear much about. But that's also the body economic damage by that, right? Because the dislocation was so big and so long, that the honest truth is it'll take us 10 years to figure out what we've just been through. Right? That's the nature of profound trauma. What makes it profound is it takes a while to figure out what the heck happened to you.
Yeah.
Which is to say it's insurmountable, right? Not at all. It's not minor. That's all.
No, it's not minor. I mean, and the national eviction ban, now that it has expired, what's going to happen? Where do you see this going?
I think we're going to see people move into the eviction pipeline more, for sure. I do think there's one thing that people haven't factored that you don't hear people talk about, which is the lack of evictions has artificially kept rents up. So people don't think about this, they tend not to think these through. Well, if people had been free to evict the folks who couldn't or didn't pay rent over the last year and a half, there would be millions of empty apartments from where people had been evicted, right? By the way, the other thing people have a tendency to forget is when you evict someone, you often get what might politely be called a disgruntled renter. And it's not infrequently the situation that disgruntled renters do substantial damage to properties, right? And if you're literally being turned out onto the street, you may not feel, you may be correct, but you don't have a lot to lose, and you may act out in ways that are unlawful or unethical or problematic for your landlord, right? And so we would have a lot of damaged properties, and we'd probably have a lot of people with vacancies. And so by saying you can't throw anyone out, you also keep all this supply of apartments off the market. So if you don't build apartments for a while, and we didn't because construction was severely hurt, and then the supply chain for things like lumber and labor was thrown massively off. So if you don't build much and you prevent people from throwing people out of apartments, there's no supply of apartments on the market. You drastically reduce the supply, right? So there's been this sort of just discombobulation of that market. So it's going to take us a while to figure out what's going on. Part of what's happening, I think, is people with more means are looking to move around for various reasons. You can see that in the price of buying homes, which is moving very aggressively up. Partly, the price of homes and the price of rents are related because we're seeing a large number of investment buyers and big companies buy thousands of single-family homes and turn that into a rental business. Right, so the way Americans live, like the way they work, is going through what would normally take years of change really, really rapidly. And one place we see dislocation is in prices, right? Because prices are what sort of attempts, at least, to harmonize the relationships between the amount of supply in the market and the amount of demand. But government policies have affected both radically. COVID has affected both radically. Supply chain issues have affected both radically, right? So we're trying to figure out where we're going on a moving vehicle with no one steering the ship. And it's a bit of a fool's errand. And so when you undertake a fool's errand, you often get a fool's result.
We're talking with Dr. Max Wolf about this expiring.
And I am your fool this morning, so I'm not just throwing rocks.
No, you're not.
So I get it. It's not about other people.
Well,
I'm the person doing the fool's errand. Yeah.
Well, no, but really, I think that, as we're watching the president negotiate with two corporatists, when we've got these radical problems that need radical solutions, as you're watching a national eviction ban expire, as people, these frontline workers had to work straight through this pandemic, oftentimes without PPEs. And they still weren't making enough money to make ends meet. And now we're watching this national eviction ban expire. There is no sense when I look at these corporatist Democrats and these corporatist Republicans, there's no sense of the pain that's out here, Dr. Wolf. No sense of the pain. I mean, I would think that.
One of the
Please talk. I mean, talk to me because we're turning people out into the streets in a pandemic, Max. That is crazy.
Yeah, well, one of the lessons of COVID was people sickened each other because they couldn't stay home from work. And so we had, I think, a long overdue against the rest of the world. Let's figure this out. But particularly the age of COVID, it seems like the paid leave from work, is kind of very immediate, right? Because it reminds us of people who probably, without knowing in many cases, but probably went to work and substantially sickened or expedited the end of life for other people because they literally couldn't stay home. And I get it. People should stay home, and we have the right to demand that we take care of each other. I'm absolutely a fan of that. I think it's important. On the flip side, though, it's hard to ask people to stay home if it might kill them. They can't live without that work, right? And so part of what I think we had was this recognition that we're going to need paid leave, right? And it was actually in the Build Back Better, the initial proposal for 12 weeks, up to 12 weeks. That was quickly kind of cut all the way back to 6. Well, I get to 8, then to 6, then to 4, then to 2. And apparently
nothing
insisted that we removed to 0 to get the deal. Now, obviously, the deal still has lots of other good things in it, which is, it's not saying the deal isn't worth it or anything, but it does seem like a harsh reminder that a lot of people aren't willing to factor that the world looks different here. I mean, making a stand on removing paid leave when we just learned it was a matter of life and death, when our workforce is quitting in droves because it's burnt out and can't get a day off, is beyond blind to the moment and just seems like terrible policy. Right? This is about the convenience of employers who want to seem generous if they offer something or not offer it at the cost of what? How much social dislocation and suffering, which probably, by the way, not even good for those employers. So that is the proper role, usually of the state, to come in and say, hey, what you guys are doing here is so short-sighted. It's not even in your benefit. Even if you've abandoned any social concern or larger care, we need people to be able to take care of people who are sick or to stay home when they're sick. And that should be easy to remember since 700,000 or more of us have just died and 22 million of us have just gotten sick.
What's wrong with that?
Dr. Wolf, I had a question. If you don't mind. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm still here, Santita. I've been listening to Dr. Wolf and all of the panelists, and I just had to jump in real quick, if you don't mind. I wanted to say that, we've seen that COVID has generated a lot of money. But I don't think that the money is actually trickling down to the people that actually need it. When I hear about the moratorium on evictions being lifted, my husband has some income property. For him, that's a good thing because guess what? He hasn't been able to get the tenants to apply for the rental assistance. So we're going on over 2 years without any rent, and they're still there. So my thing is that because of the way the red tape that they put in to actually acquire the money, and then when we apply for the SBA loan, that money, we're not getting that either. And I have resubmitted documents over and over again. I actually submitted a congressional inquiry to the SBA because none of this money is trickling down to the people that need it. I just thank God that he has a full-time job, that we're still able to maintain our property. But this is the reality that is happening. And the reason why people are losing their home is because the money is not getting to the people. So I think that we need an audit of where all these trillions and trillions of dollars have gone, because they have not made it to everyday people. Is there an audit system that's in place right now, Dr. Wolf?
So we do have audit systems. I think the problem, and I don't disagree with you, and you certainly probably are more up on some aspects of this than me. I know that we didn't do a good job of distributing some of the money. So the SBA monies and a lot of the corporate monies, there was very complex, difficult paperwork. And it's very clear now that large, sophisticated organizations with lawyers and accountants and skilled personnel did very well at getting the money because they were good at getting through the maze of paperwork, right? So they were probably not the most needy, but they were really good at the paperwork, right? If you make a lot of complex paperwork required to get something, then you're going to end up getting the people who are best at complex paperwork to get the money, right? This is a problem. To me, I think it's kind of a bigger issue, and it's not to obscure the issue you bring up, but we've spent 30 years thinking the good thing to do was to design our social safety net to be difficult to access, confusing, bureaucratic, and humiliating to people who are trying to claim benefits, to reduce benefits, and to be consistent with a sadistic, unproductive, old-fashioned, and often racist idea about who takes benefits. What we need is the same high-quality, very simple customer service and easy user interface that you see when Facebook wants to get your personal information. We should make it that easy to get public benefits. This sort of weird Victorian morality play, making it embarrassing, difficult, humiliating to get what social benefits we offer, is part of the problem here. So we spent decades making it hard and embarrassing, difficult, confusing, stressful for people to go through some gauntlet to claim their social benefits. So even when we don't want to do that, and I think there was genuine intent to try to be helpful here by a lot of federal, state, and local agencies. People were working hard to try to get the right aid to the right people, and I think that's pretty clear. They have to push it through a system designed to obfuscate, embarrass, confuse, humiliate, and so it ends up going through this sort of bad system, which makes it harder to deliver, even again, in a situation like this, where I think the intention and the provision around helping people was quite genuine, but you're passing it through the system, right? And I think that's one of the lessons of COVID. I think that's true about healthcare, right? So in a country that almost never provides even really basic healthcare to a lot of people in an efficient manner, when we suddenly want and need to do things like get people information about how to be safe and careful with COVID, to get people to take seriously their social distancing, to take seriously the masking and the hand washing, to take seriously the vaccinations. It's very difficult to do that because you don't have a system to do it. You don't have accumulated trust, and you just don't have practice where people know how to get these benefits or who to get them from or who to listen to, right? And again, I'm not trying to be down. Actually, I think this is all very solvable. I don't even think it's very expensive. I just think it takes a consistent long-term commitment. But I don't think it's that expensive. But I think if you want to be able to help people efficiently and quickly, then you have to build the pipes and the trust to help people, just like you have to build out infrastructure to do anything else.
Does that help you, Pearl?
Huh? Yes, Santita, it does. I just think that, I don't know how they're going to make it so that we can get access to the money because we shouldn't have to do flip just to get access to this money because the money is going somewhere. And I think that we need to figure out where it's going because it's a lot of money out here.
Oh, yeah.
They dumped trillions and trillions of dollars into this economy. And I feel like even with the local programs within the state, everything is a lottery. And so it's like you're playing Russian roulette with people's livelihoods and businesses. And that's why you see a lot of people just unfortunately aren't able to come back from this pandemic.
It's a tough priorities decision. It always is, right? So we also kind of punted that, which I understand. It's obviously something that's a bit of a hot potato, but it was very important. It should never have been punted, right? In other words, when you get to a situation where the federal government, through monetary policy and fiscal policy and various programs, is going to, in essence, bail out lots of people, you confront a bunch of issues in the U.S. One, which is we've had this vilification of bailouts, which again is kind of silly in a lot of ways. But two, it is a bit of a social situation because it's a social decision, right? Like what is and is not important enough to bail out? What do we need? And then you see these sort of assertions about what we do and don't need that don't make any sense. and that appeal to these sort of outdated, sadistic Victorian values, right? Like, we don't need restaurants. Like, we don't. I mean, because they employ millions of people and are the tax anchors and nightlife anchors of all of our downtown areas, which keep them from being crime-infested hellholes who pay all the local taxes. So I'm not so sure, right? I'm not so sure this idea that, like, the virtuous family is at home on their farm baking potatoes has a whole lot in common with reality for a lot of people, right? And not every restaurant is, at the Four Seasons. A lot of restaurants are for people who are not super wealthy, who are looking for inexpensive food so they can work or whatever, and lots of people work there. I don't know if that's so optional, right? I don't know if that's a reasonable decision. But if we are going to save some places, let's save the workers.
Yeah, I mean, and save their homes, Max. And save their homes. I mean, to me, it's cruel. Well, I mean, because what we're watching is cruel.
My point is,
you know, I mean, my point is, you're taking out family leave. You're taking out 2 free years of community college where people could get retrained for these jobs where you need to be computer literate, and on and on and on. All the things that we need are being stripped away. I mean, and then in a pandemic,
it's not me who's taking it out.
Well, it's not you. Well, it's not you. Let me make that clear. But I mean, these people live in COVID hotspots. You're sending people in a pandemic out into the world or out onto the streets who could be sick. I mean, Max, this is...
And who will infect you, by the way. So even if you don't care about them at all, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a big issue. And I'm not condoning sort of sociopathy here and saying it's fine not to care about other people. Not my point. My point is, even if you don't care about other people at all, you're going to get sick too. Now, I understand there's a solution to that a fair number of our fellow citizens have embraced, which is just go full on nuts and decide there's no COVID or whatever. But for those of us who are still content to live on this side of the mirror, there's a risk. We can disagree about how serious it is, but there's a risk, right? And so sending those people out there isn't just ethically wrong. It's also bad. It's bad for business. It's bad for reopening. It's bad for rates of sickness and illness. It's bad for death, right? It's bad on a cash-on-cash basis. Again, not that that's all that matters, but every person that you need to flee sick and has a burden on the society and the healthcare system. That's 1,000 times the burden of 2 weeks of paid vacation. So it's not even smart in a sociopathic cash-on-cash only worry about the money. It's like locking people in cages for $40,000 a year, but be unwilling to pay them, put another $7,000 or $8,000 into their education so they can have more skills and not end up in prison. It's just not even smart.
So as we're watching, we're watching Blackstone. I mean, they're buying up, all of these rental properties. So, I mean, more and more Americans are really, home ownership increasingly is out of reach for us. But now you've got Blackstone, this investment firm, who are buying up all of these rental properties. So America, are we about to become a nation of renters if we can? Is that what's going to happen here?
There's a lot of investors. So it's not just one firm. It's a sort of a movement.
Right. I mean, I'm just making them like
I'm
making them like the figurehead. Yeah. Right. So
okay, yeah. So BlackRock and Blackstone and other investors have gotten, reasonably gotten some attention for buying a large number of homes. Some of this began, by the way, in the 08-09 period. So this was in some ways a 13-year-old story, but it has re-intensified, particularly in the Southeast, where the investors like the fact that there are very limited tenant rights and legal obstructions to eviction. In other words, if someone doesn't pay you, it's pretty easy to get them out of the units. Obviously, COVID threw that off a little bit, but generally speaking. But yeah, I think we're seeing, look, these are all driven by that inequity, right? When you have this much wealth and income inequality, then some people are going to use some of the extra money they have to buy the houses from other people who can't afford them anymore and lend them to them. I mean, again, there's nothing surprising here, though. So we do have to admit that, right? So we had about 30%, 20 to 30% of Americans owned their own homes before the big federal programs that were born of the Great Depression. The Fannie Mae and the Freddie Mac and the bunch of different programs that go by their acronym names now. that were started in the Great Depression. And that number, that 20-30%, is actually a lot less than people would think for the urban population. Because remember, in the 1930s, we still had a fair number of people in agriculture and in rural areas. So it's a portion of the population much larger than it is today, right, in 2021. So what we basically did is we committed to subsidizing middle-class access to homes, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that tended to follow the normal social pathways. So it was discriminatory against women and single female-headed households. It was discriminatory against people of color, and it was discriminatory against urban residents as against suburban residents. So it was imperfect, but it built us up into the 60s and 70%.
I got 20 seconds.
More than doubled the percentage. Yeah, so more than double the percentage of Americans that had houses. In other words, we decided to subsidize mass homeownership until we stopped doing that 10 years ago, and it's not rather unsurprisingly been declining as we've stopped making it a commitment.
Can you I want you to wrap this up when we get on the other side, just for a couple of minutes. Wow, you've given us a lot to think about. We've been doing a lot of subsidizing, but America has to get back to building people. Or maybe we need to get there, right? If we're really honest about our history, because the country was built upon stolen land and by enslaved labor we didn't pay. But now we can get it right, everybody. We've got to do that. I love everybody. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. Going to get some closing thoughts from Dr. Max Wolf. God bless you. See you in the morning. We can do it. Dr. Wolf, I want you to put a button on this because it's wow. Just every day, I see us. When I think of people who are going to be put on the streets. Yeah, I mean, because Chaparral is doing. She's got two.
Sure that's the correct pronunciation.
Oh, you got the correct pronunciation, but she's gotten two. She's married. She's gotten her two children. Her two daughters. They just graduated from college. One's on her way to law school. Another one's on her way into a master's program. She and her husband are.
My condolences. I teach in one of those.
Well, you might have one. You might have one of your daughters. She's a brilliant young lady. She might be in one of your classes. But
you goes to school here in the city. She actually might be.
If she does, I'm going to connect you because she would. She's
in New York, or
she's in Illinois. I don't know where she's going to go.
To invade her family privacy.
Well, no, I don't know what. But anyway, you would be good for her.
Look me up if you're coming.
Oh, please, that is so sweet. You would be good for her. But see, people have some real needs. I'm bringing Chaparral up because she's working hard. She's not a rich woman, not monetarily, but she and her husband have been working hard, working to really make this dream work for them. And they can't. It's just trying to gain traction. It's like, my goodness. And I mean, I see what it's doing to her. And I'm seeing just different people who are struggling.
An effort to get an SBA loan for a COVID-affected business that she's working on.
It's trying to get that. That's been very difficult for her. She's a caterer. She has a wonderful catering business. We all get food from her. She's fabulous. But I mean, I'm just saying, with this eviction ban that is about to be a thing of the past, when we look at but I'm just saying the manifestation of it. The manifestation of it is something we're going to have to live with, right? We're about to see what it's going to look like, and that's not going to be too cute, Max. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I think it varies enormously regionally too, though. So I don't know what the Illinois situation is, but New York has been extended all the way through into next year. New Jersey and Connecticut also. But other places, no, right? And then there's plenty of constitutional challenges, right? Because New York's original extension was struck down by the Supreme Court.
Are people going to get any relief?
Right? It's also possible.
Are people going to get any relief?
I mean, my fear is there's always going nuts or getting fentanyl, and hopefully people find other coping methods. Otherwise, we have another set of issues, right? People do seem to be getting some relief by shooting each other in public places again, so it's nice to see that outlet.
Max?
Yeah, I mean, I think we start to see those. Yeah, that was obviously perhaps in poor taste, was attempts
No,
of humor.
it's not.
Look,
No. No, that's not it.
yeah,
I think what you're hearing this morning is a little bit of frustration because I'm hearing all of this. I'm seeing so much being cut back from our human infrastructure bill, and there is no sensitivity at all for the struggles of
and we don't start
everyday
with
people.
much.
Of course not. I mean, look,
The other problem is
Bernie
we don't
started us
start
off with
with much.
$16
We
trillion.
don't have very generous.
Well, I mean, when the American Society, is anyone listening to anyone, Max? The American Society of Civil Engineers says we need more than $20 trillion to get our bridges and our infrastructure, our hard infrastructure together. We can't, Meg, really? And then the Pentagon gets $10 billion they didn't even ask for. We've got falling bridges. I mean, crumbling bridges, crumbling infrastructure, crumbling roads. You and I both spend time out of the country. We see what other countries are looking like. They come to the United States, they're appalled. They're like, wait a minute. I thought your airport was going to look a bit different. Max, this is
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
it's high time. But yeah, it's also crazy because, again, maybe I'm fixated on this because I'm an economist, and unfortunately, if you give someone a hammer, the world can look like a nail. But that notwithstanding, I mean, we know that the benefits are going to just massively outweigh the costs of having good roads, bridges, tunnels, airports, ports, public education, stuff like that. Will there be no losers? No, there are people who make a good living off of those dysfunctions for sure, but there are not that many of them. And the vast majority of folks will be better off, right, with that problem at least managed. The same is true with this paid family leave stuff, right? I mean, to me, it's easy to say you care about families and you have family values. It's a little bit harder to give something up to show you do. And if you can't give people time off to take care of sick and dying relatives, or when they're sick and dying, you can't really pretend you care about them. And I think the problem that maybe some people don't understand is COVID made that raw for a lot of people. I don't think the same stuff that you could get away with in 2019 is going to play the same in 2021, 2022, 2023, right? Because this is raw. This is an open wound for a lot of people, right? There are millions of Americans who went to work when they didn't have to with protective equipment that they was inadequate or absent. Now, some of that was hard stuff to get, but that notwithstanding, there are many people who saw their employers, or at least feel like they saw their employers, some right, some wrong, but feel like they saw their employers say, I don't care if you die, go make me a couple bucks. And that toothpaste does not go back in the tube. And in that environment, this idea that somebody is going to grandstand on a bill to make a donor happy, that means if you're sick or dying or someone in your household is too effing bad, I don't know what happens there. I don't know where that goes, but that doesn't go away. That's going to create blowback, right? And, blowback is a bad force. We don't know if it's spousal battery, child battery, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, despondency, depression, gun violence, whatever form it takes, becoming an extremist of some type. But these things are starting to translate quickly into serious social pathology, which makes very clear that fixing the problem isn't just better morally, which it always was, but it's economically essential now too, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, Dr. King wrote the book. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? We're here, everybody. We are here. And I guess, my only point with you, because you bring up these profound issues, and one of the things that I love about you is that you help us to understand this society. You just take us through an economic lens, and it makes sense. You make economics come alive for us, which is so important. And I'm just seeing this complete lack of appreciation for the real problems of real people. And not only does it make me sad, it makes me angry because I see people struggling. I see people struggling, trying to make it on fast food if they can do that. It's not right, Max. It's just not right. Not when you've got people on track to become trillionaires. I mean, what? And now you want to build, you say you want to colonize space? That's a joke. My mother and I were laughing about that the other day. She said these people still don't get it. They're talking about colonialism in space. Really? You don't understand that colonialism, imperialism is just wrong? You don't get it? And so now we're going to make luxury stations or whatever the heck it is out in space. I mean, come on, Max. This is crazy. It's crazy. But I'm going to give you the final word here.
We're going to get there. Yeah. So I'm less knowledgeable about outer space settlement. I feel like that might be a little far off. But I know, unfortunately, some of our leadership has already taken their presidents in outer space, which seems problematic. Look, I think to sort of the way I see the world right now, we have to admit that we're still dealing with COVID, figure out more of a cooperative solution there, and also start to plan for a future that isn't just trying to force people to be just what they were before, because that toothpaste isn't going back in the tube. I think the way we live, the way we work, the way we interact with each other has to change. A lot of it is for the better. It's always a little scary when it's unfamiliar, but the time, the energy, the money, the strife we waste trying to force people back into accommodations that didn't work before is tragic deadweight loss. All right, so let's move forward. We need that family leave clearly. We need that infrastructure clearly. It'll pay for itself N times over if we do it, and it'll cost us N times over if we don't.
It's going to cost us. And there it is. And we need it. And you know what? Call 202. I'm going to write this up here for you guys. 202-224-3121. Let them know that you want them to fight. I mean, you call Congress. And I don't care who, I mean, you call the senators and let them know this is what you need. Okay? You tell them what you need. And tell them they need to vote for it. You need it. We are the ones who are in. We have ceded the control of our political system to the oligarchs and to the corporatists and to corporations. They're not looking out for you. That's not going to work. Got to do something different. And so, thank you, Max, and thank you. It's just. Goodness gracious, it's a lot. It's a lot. If one more person calls me about a job that they need, I'm like, I wish I could help you. I wish. But I'm sending you much love, Max. Sending everybody much love. I'm going to let you all go.
There are a lot of unfilled jobs, so there is some hope there. There does seem to be a fair amount of job opening out there, at least still now, even though getting folks into those jobs has been quite challenging, and there maybe need to be some benefit and pay accommodation on some of them. But I think a lot of people are just, and this is the last piece, I think we need a process of getting people comfortable and confident that they go back to work. They're not going to be at massive health risk or abused. And the good news about that is it's quite doable. And the bad news about that is we haven't made much stride there yet.
Well, we're going to continue to work to get there, because that's really it. And people, I think, are coming into the awareness of how much they really do matter, how much they mean. And so, I'm waiting to see that happen. Sending you much love, my dear friend. Sending all my morning stars, sending you all much love. Mwah. Thank you, Paul. Sending you much love. Sending everybody love today. Have a great day. Max, I'll call you a little bit later. But love you all.
Take care.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.